The Spanish FR-8 rifle. We have an example of one here, along with Southern Tactical's Set-Me-See replica, if you want to call it, in semi-auto. How did this gun kind of come about? It's a very unusual weapon, and right now they're extremely popular, collectible, and they do bring considerable amount of money for what it is. Well, what happened post-World War II is you had the Cold War, and the world was divided, or at least Europe was, between Russia and the United States. So after the war, they both formed coalitions for the next war. Russia had the Warsaw Pact, which had a whole bunch of Eastern European countries, whether they wanted to or not, as allies, along with Yugoslavia. And the United States, Britain, France, and most of the other Western European countries formed NATO. So the whole idea with NATO was the rifle had to be one caliber, and that way all the countries could muster their troops together and have one large fighting force. Okay, the Russians didn't quite do that. They went with the AK-47, and all the countries that they encompassed were basically issued older arms and given the machinery to produce them, such as the M44 carbine and the T-33 Tokarev pistol. That's why you see a lot of these versions made in Yugoslavia, Poland, everything else. And eventually, over time, the Russians kind of brought them up to speed, and everybody had AK-47s. But you have to remember, post-World War II, that was all new technology. They didn't quite develop it yet. So the United States kind of bullied everybody into the 7.62 by 51 millimeter NATO, okay, which there is a civilian version called the 308 Winchester, but I found out that NATO chamber dimensions are different than the 308 Winchester. There will be a video made where I headspace these rifles, the bolt-action ones, and discuss the differences in detail. So that's something that always pops up, but I'm going to work on that. So everybody's trying to get something, and they finally figured out what cartridge, and everybody was designing a rifle. FN had the FAL, and everybody wanted at least a semi-automatic, if not a semi-automatic or selective fire rifle. So that's what everybody was working on. Spain did manufacture its own guns, plus Spain happened to have a few engineers that were cooling their heels in Spain, because they're probably wanted elsewhere in Europe. So they started designing the Set-Me-See using technology developed for the STG rifles, the 44 or 45 or 43, and they just started producing, or how can I put it, they started engineering it further to refine it, which you had the Set-Me-See, and then the Germans came, the West Germans came and manufactured under license what they called the G1 or the H&K version of the rifle. So, while they were implementing this, okay, you don't do this overnight. So while they were developing this weapon here, they wanted to have their troops trained. So they took both the Spanish model 1943 short rifle, which you still find examples of that used by the Spanish Air Force. And they modified them, fitted a Set-Me style barrel, which you see is kind of reversed on how they did it. And they had sights added that mimic the sight picture on the Set-Me-See rifle. So the idea was they took these old guns, and the FR stands for Fusil Reformado, or converted rifle in English. So they took some old stock weapons, converted them, and used them to train the soldiers how to use the sight system that came with the Set-Me-See. Because production didn't catch up and they needed to train the men, so as they were implementing this new rifle, this was what they used to train their troops. Okay, and we'll go over the different things here in a minute. Alright, so you have your Set-Me-See, and all of us that are familiar with it, you have an open sight, then you flip this sight around for the little apertures. The open sight is 100 meters, and you have 2, 3, and 400 meters by rotating this sight here on the back. It uses a front sight post hidden in there, which, much like on an AR-15, you have a special tool with prongs, and you can turn it up and adjust the elevation. But what's weird is the windage is also adjusted. The post is off center, and I think depending on which way you turn it, I will do an in-depth explanation of the sights. Your windage and elevation is adjusted with the front sight. The rear sight is fixed. Now, if you notice on the Set-Me-See, this is where your cocking handle is to operate the weapon, and the barrel comes out down here, and your bayonet is mounted here. And this flash hider is also set to use the standard NATO rifle grenades. I think 22 millimeter grenades would go on a spud, and you'd use a blank. Now, on the little bolt action guns, and again, La Corona, I believe, these were 8 millimeter guns manufactured in Spain. Try to get a look. Most of that's worn. We can get some better pictures. They took the actions and then they fitted somehow a Set-Me barrel on there. But what they did, if you notice, where the barrel comes, again, same configuration, same thing on this weapon here. But where the sight is, the top band, I think they turned them upside down or something. Where the op handle goes is where the barrel goes, and underneath they made a little compartment to hold cleaning equipment. They both take the same bayonet, which you see the lug there, it goes over, and the handle latches onto that lug, and down here it's reversed. Okay? But they both will accept the same bayonet. So a lot of questions. First off is the NATO chamber, which is different than a civilian 308 chamber. I've got headspace gauges coming, and we will headspace the gun. I also have more than one example of these. Now, one question that came up is if you look at this rear sight, which is kind of welded on there. Well, let me change this around. We don't need the Set-Me-See anymore. Now, going back to this rear sight, the reason I always have more than one example of a firearm is I found something about the rear sight. It's just a little dial, and it's locked in there. And here you have the open notch, 100 meter sight, and you have your Set-Me-See front sight. So the whole idea is to learn how to shoot the Set-Me-See. I'll rotate over to one of the little Doppler deals. And here is where you have your different size peep style sights. Now, when the sight is there, you see it kind of is opened in the back, the narrows. And if you notice how this works, this back part is where there's a screw, the rivet, and everything, and it's welded to the receiver. And so when you look at it, that is a thinner side. There's a thin side and a thicker side. And this other side just has where the rivet is. No screw or nothing. So my question is, I found these guns that have the sight welded on reversed. Now I've made another video. I'll try to tie it in at this point. And I discuss and show you several variations in what I'm talking about this sight. So that's another strange question that goes on. And you know, everyone says, hey, it's a great gun, this and that. And it's basically a Mauser 98 action, takes stripper clips. But the 7.62 NATO is much shorter than the 8mm Mauser. So if you see up in the front there towards the receiver, where you see the brass drags on there, they had to probably modify the floor plate and then put this insert into the magazine to where you got like a feed ramp where you feed out of the standard mag and then go up into the chamber. So that was one type of modification. But as you see, it's a standard 98, bolt, and your arrangement there, the funky sight and that, and the Set Me See barrel fitted there. I'm not quite sure how they fitted them on there. I haven't pulled one apart, but we will kind of take a look at it. But let's look at it from the underside. So as you see, standard like K98 Mauser, you got your action screws and the little locking screws on there. Got two different ways of doing a sling, through there and then through this on the stock, which kind of mimics, and you can use a Set Me See sling, which this is a strange variation here that came with this. It's kind of not like some of the others that I have. And then if you press the detent there, that little tube will slide out and you unscrew the cap where the bayonet lug is, and it's just a tubular compartment inside there. So, interesting rifle. So why did I end up getting one of these guns as a must-have for my collection? Well, let's discuss that further. So you'll ask, why the FR-8 rifle? And strange thing is, I do remember when they imported these, I believe, because it's got an import mark there. I never was interested in one because this was not a traditional Mauser rifle. And had the bayonet attached, so that's what that looks like on there. I was into collecting Mauser rifles back in the 80s. So I was buying Argentine, Brazilian, all the stuff coming in. I had Enfields and that. And this was kind of an unusual gun. Plus, also, you could get a decent surplus bolt-action rifle for, $125. Where if you watch Misha there, he has some of those. It'd be a copy of the Set Me See that came in back in the 70s and 80s. And he does tell you what the cost was. And it was astronomical compared to collecting these guns. So I think these, I was into Mausers at the time. So when these things came in, they didn't interest me. I didn't want one. And now that I kind of come back and I'm fooling around with the Set Me See and these clones of the H&K rifle and all this other stuff, I said, hey, it'd be neat to have one of these. But what happened and why this is what I would call a fad rifle or something now. We all know that certain Milsurp guns go for a crazy amount of money, like KR-98s. Okay, to give you an example, the last minty one I had that was all matching and that I sold in the late 80s to a guy for $3. And I mean, it was a hard sale and he was hemming and hawing and that, but that's what they went for. And I thought it was crazy because back in the late 70s, you can still get one. If you found somebody that had one lying around, you could still pick one up for under about two bills. Okay, and I'm talking all matching, never been used, got a nice bright bore on it, you know, and mint condition just about, or excellent plus. That was what they went for. And when I seen it getting there and then people get crazy and want more and more, I got out of it. Because this, you know, what everyone's complaining about now is not anything new. Alright? Alright, what the street price was on one of these back in the day, I have no idea. But now, they go between 7 and 8 when they come up. Some people even ask 12, okay, with the bayonet. I mean, it was nice and minty. It had a bayonet and a sling in that, but they had it on a gunbroker for 12, okay, which is, I don't know. You know, you guys can put your opinions down in the comment section, but, and I had to get crazy and I got several examples, okay, and an FR-7, which we'll do a video on next. So what would cause people to want these? And you always see a video of somebody, hey, this is cool, this is in 308, you can hunt with it and all this other stuff, and they, you know, show you loading it, shooting it. One guy's took off this muzzle brake and put a suppressor. And another curious thing, if you look at this muzzle brake, there's a notch in it, okay, that goes across. They said this was to use to cut wire. You'd put wire and then fire the gun. Kind of a noisy way to cut a piece of wire, but that's what they say it's for. There's questions, okay, about these guns, especially the FR-7. I do have a set of headspace gauges coming, and we'll headspace the guns and go over that and compare it to a civilian or sporting 308 rifle to see about chamber dimensions. But it is a neat gun. And spoiler alert, I did go out and shoot it. It's an interesting thing to shoot. The sights are a little weird, but you know, you can figure them out and get used to it. I have to make another video talking about sight picture, adjustment, all that other stuff. And I'll do it in details from what I've done on the research. So, that's what it is. And the thing that gets me is the fact that these things sell and constantly sell. I chased around on several auctions trying to get an example and ended up, I just got frustrated and angry and kind of overbid, okay. So this thing's going to stay with me forever. You know, I might have to wait 10, 15 years, maybe the price will go up where I can break even again. Don't know. But they are an interesting gun. Well, I got one and we'll take it all apart and look at the barrel and what's underneath and everything. I got one disassembled. They are fun to shoot and they're accurate, you know. So we're going to do some shooting videos and other things, you know, head spacing, sights, all that other stuff. But interesting piece. So this is the first one. I'm going to do some numerous videos on this weapon system here, this rifle, and talk on different points. I don't want to drag on too long. Alright guys, hit the like button, subscribe, and stay tuned.